The awesome and super popular PS2 emulator, PCSX2, has hit 2.0, its first stable release in 4 years, and there's some big changes and fixes in here, like the black burnout skybox. Alright, so the entire video is not going to be me just reading this page to you, but there is going to be a lot of information on this page that's going to be conveying in a more technical and more informed manner than I ever could, so I am going to be referencing this a bit, but a lot of this is going to be me comparing the 1.6 version to the 2.0 and kind of talking about some of the changes that have happened since then. So if you haven't updated your emulator in a while, which, let's be real, a lot of us don't update our emulators all the time, then I can kind of catch you up and you can see what's changed. So for starters, this is what 1.6 looks like. This is right out of the box. I honestly forgot that it looked like this. This is so different than the other setup. This is crazy. It's functional though. It's definitely functional. There's a lot of options that you can get into here and you can still really set up everything exactly how you like, but the setup for, I don't know when they changed it, way before 2.0, looks a fair bit better than this. This is like a air quote special build I have for PCSX2. This is 1.7 and you can see the UI is a fair bit different on this already, like just not even going into any of the settings or anything like that. And you may have glanced and saw this right here about QT, and that's what really makes all this work. And if you haven't updated your PCSX2 but you use something like DuckStation, this might look familiar to you. You can probably just barely see in the top left that says DuckStation. That's the PS1 emulator, and this uses QT as well. What is that? What does that mean? Well, I'd like to formally apologize to anyone's ears that was more familiar with this than me. It's not QT, it's cute, okay? And cute, it's basically cross-platform UI. It's sort of a framework or a foundation that I looked into a little bit. Apparently a ton of stuff uses it. Yuzu, Citra, Dolphin, everybody's doing it. It's cool. Here's a section on the actual PCSX2 blog post for 2.0 talking about it. So the original thing that they were using was WX widgets. That was what was handling the GUI. Apparently other emulators were using them at the time, and it was okay. And that's not just talking about the way it looks, though. You can now do nice little themes to personalize your emulator if you want to do that. And this right here is specifically what I was talking about. A user brought through their cute expertise from DuckStation and put it into here. And this allows for a lot of really cool things going on now. Like, look at that. This is like a big picture controller kind of setup. Now, if you're following along at home with the blog post, I am skipping around a little bit. I want to go ahead and point out, because I think this makes the most sense to talk about it now. Whenever they were using WX widgets, changing settings was handled in a very specific way to work with the widgets. But now that they've swapped over to this new UI, they can handle things a little differently. And this is absolutely my favorite thing here. PCSX2 now has per game settings that can be detached from your global settings. So you can have your global settings to, like, if you know you always want to run the game into 4K because you have a 4K monitor, you can do that. But maybe some games you want to run at a slightly different thing, like you want to stretch them or you want to try to do just whatever thing different to it, you can now do that. I literally have an entire build of PCSX2 dedicated to running my custom Mercenaries 1 settings and patches and all sorts of things, because I couldn't do this before, and I'm like, forget it. I'll just download the whole thing again and I'll make a own weird little version of it. And hopefully I don't have to do that anymore. At the end of the video, I am going to try to kind of recreate all the settings and move them over to 2.0 and see if I can do that and have one unified emulator. And I haven't done it yet, so I don't know if it works or not. If it doesn't, I mean, I still have my working thing, but it would be really nice if going forward, anytime I want to make my own new version of that setup, if I want to do a different game, Mercenaries 2 maybe even, then I can just do that, and I don't have to make a new folder and a new version of the emulator every time. There's two things that go along with game customization and fixing that I haven't done a ton with. I haven't played with 2.0 a lot, and I want to say they kind of worked well in the old versions. Like, they did their job. They existed for a reason, and they did their job, and the way it was handled worked and made games work. And so anything less than the game works how I want it to, in my mind, is kind of going to be a failure. But I do want to highlight these things, and I don't want to be negative about them. Hopefully, these are all just way easier and everything's great, but they are removing plugins. So a lot of people never used any of the plugins, or I mean, a lot of people didn't mess with the settings on the emulator, like, at all. But so if you never did that, you're like, okay, whatever. But for people that use them, they say that they went ahead, and the main reason why they got rid of them is they contacted a lot of the authors for plugins and assimilated the code into the core PCSX2 project. So ideally, a lot of those plugins that people are using are just in the base of the emulator. Now, again, I don't know. I haven't played a ton of stuff on 2.0 to see if anything's broken. And the next thing, which ideally should just be like a net positive, something really cool, and that is automatic game fixes. Now, I don't know if you've seen this, but at the top, there's a big thing that says compatibility, and this has been so useful. This is amazing. This emulator and Dolphin, I go to them frequently. I mean, maybe I don't really have to anymore, but we'll go ahead and open that up. And for one, let me just go ahead and say their compatibility is amazing. This looks like, oh no, only 1.23% is perfect. Dude, most of the playables are pretty much actually perfect. Like, perfect is not something you need to worry about at all. A lot of the there's such a huge number of playable. I kind of wish they had a middle section where it's like indistinguishable except for, you know, whatever nuanced thing. Like, the code doesn't literally render the same way it does on the PS2, but functionally it's exactly the same. All right, this is going to be me picking on the emulator a little bit because this is a game I know has issues. And you can see from the list, the latest testing, it has not been tested. We're talking about 1.6 being old. This has not even been tested on 1.6. 1.5 was the last time that anyone said, hey, something's happening here. So we'll open that up, and that should absolutely tell us things are wrong, which is what I'm looking for. All right, I know there's a lot of text here, so it's probably a little hard to read, but again, this is an old version of the emulator. I'm wanting to point out things that are wrong. So if you look at some of these setups, they're like hacks, aggressive preset, must be interlaced in this, or it'll freeze, must boot game into fast mode with all these things turned off, or it'll crash. Just all these different little setups, and then look, known issues, status, active, minor, broken textures, go to here, use this plugin setting, make sure that this setting's right. The reason why I'm pointing these out is because basically anytime before I played a game, I'd go here and I'd type it out and see what's wrong and what I need to do. But hopefully now, with the simplification of, you know, removing the plugins and putting all the stuff in, and then having air quote automatic game fixes, hopefully a lot of this stuff is automatically applied, and people that don't know how to do all these heavy custom things can just poof, it just works. So for 1.6, here's an example of what you would do for Jak and Daxter and the Precursor Legacy. You would go to config, you would go to video, and then we will go to plugin settings. And then right here, you need to go to this right here, the MIP mapping, and you need to swap it to at least basic is what it needs to be on. And that is supposed to be a workaround for getting textures to not break during specific points in the game. So unfortunately, the way that this game renders out with interlaced, it looks really weird and you have to do some extra hacks. So I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to show off some of the fixes. I'm not going to do literally every single one. But right here, you can notice some things wrong. That grass, I mean, maybe you think it's just like a stylistic choice. If you have played it though, you'd know that is not how this game is supposed to look. So I'm gonna go ahead, and this is 1.6. I have not done any changes to anything to make it work in a specific way. I've looked at the wiki, and now I'm going to put in some changes and show you what you can manually do to make this look a little bit better. So if we go through and we mess with the MIP mapping, and I'll just put that to, I'll put it on basic, and the blending accuracy, we're gonna put that on basic as well. You're gonna notice some changes. And look, all of a sudden we have grass. Things are working a little bit. Now I want to go ahead and jump into 2.0 and just show you right off the bat the default setup for it and what it looks like, since it should be doing some auto game fixes, and we'll see what that even means. And this is 2.0 right out the bat. I haven't touched any settings at all. I loaded it a BIOS. I made sure that it auto-detected my controller and then automatically set everything up. I ran the game, and this is exactly what it looks like. And hopefully you can tell there is a huge difference in this. This is really nice. This looks really good. Again, I haven't played with the resolution at all or anything. I am not looking at them side by side, but you are right now. I think this may have the de-interlacing patch on by default as well. Like, this looks really nice. I want to... Okay, bonus round. I'm going to up the resolution, and I want to see how this looks, because I'm just going to crank up the settings. This seems like this looks really nice. Okay, I take it back. I think that the like rain particles and things like that look better, but I think there is still a weird interlaced thing. If you look like right in the corners, I don't know if you can see it. Everything looks strangely blurry. It looks like you kind of made the image in like VR and then tried to like fix it or something. Everything looks smudgy and weird. And the strange thing about it doesn't look too bad, especially whenever you actually get in motion. But then if I pause it, you'll really be able to see the effect. Okay, oh, that's what it's supposed to look like. Because like right now, it's a little jarring. At the low resolution, it actually like wasn't at all. But whenever you bump it up, some things get prettier, and then some things get a little disorienting. But watch me pause. You can see the effect kind of go away. So, yeah, I don't know how to fix that. I don't know if this has, like, 2.0 has a fix for that, or if it even, like, should be fixed. But it's a little strange, but a ton of stuff just automatically applied, which is really, really good. Now, there is one more hope for trying to get this game a little bit smoother, and that is patching. So you can see this nice little Burnout 3 takedown screenshot they have on here for, wow, look at this. We can now make the game render in 16:9. We can do 60 FPS, progressive scan. Hopefully the Jak and Daxter one has an interlaced fix or a progressive scan. Maybe that's the same thing for that game, but there's little individual cheats or patches that are now labeled, and you can see the authors, and you can go through and enable or disable individual things in your per game settings without having to touch any patch files. Is that how you say it? I don't patch files. I don't know. Okay, let's go ahead and right click, go to properties, and then go to patches, and look, we got two of them right here. No interlacing and no blur enabled, and widescreen 16:9 enabled. And we can of course do individual per game settings if I wanted to, for some reason, change the aspect ratio if something was fighting something. I could go ahead and do that, but let's go ahead and just take a look at what we got. Oh my gosh, everything is fixed. This looks totally fine and it runs perfectly. That was so easy. Okay, that is a huge win for 2.0. Wow, this is nice. This is like, I don't notice anything weird. There's like some screen tearing maybe? I don't know. No, I don't know. I could definitely play this for a while, and like, I think it would take me a long time before I go, oh wow, this looks clearly wrong. Like, I think it would have to be little details that, if anything's wrong, it's something really small and very easy to overlook. So I'm very happy with this. Now we're at the section with all the big changes. The bane of developers, graphics improvements. I want to go ahead and show off just a few of the things that I think are cool. I'll go through it pretty quickly. Vulkan is now here in the emulator, and it gives a lot of the OpenGL stuff. I'm not going to go into what the renders are a lot because something that's really cool is automatic renderer. Balancing what kind of renderer you would use on this emulator used to be such a just kind of a headache and just kind of a big question mark. There's normally one or two renderers that, depending on your graphics card, you kind of leaned more into using. Like if you were AMD, generally speaking, you're like, ooh, I really want to use the OpenGL. Whereas if you were NVIDIA, you might want to use this one or that one. And then whenever a certain game would call for a specific one, it's just like, oh, well, what do? I have to experiment a lot. But now the emulator has an automatic renderer. So I'm just going to leave that as my default, and it will pick for me what it thinks the best renderer should be for my setup and for that game. They say right here, priority goes first to stability and then to accuracy. So they want the game to actually run first and foremost, and then hopefully it runs in a way that makes sense. Like they want it to be playable. Maybe you have some graphical glitches instead of here's a perfect image that's literally an image and you can't like move around at all. And then the next part is going to get into a kind of what made the PS2 so special is the way they blended layers of graphics. There's a lot of people that talk about transparency effects and how the PS2 did it in a very specific way. And even HD re-releases of these games, or like, I think Silent Hill on the PS2 and the Xbox actually has like bonus content and more features, but whenever you look at the transparency and the effects in that game, they look better on the PS2 because the PS2 just had a different way to sort of blend elements together that the Xbox did not do. And so that was trouble for a lot of games. A lot of the stuff isn't really going to actually practically mean anything for the way that you set things up. But basically, what you need to understand is now the emulator is smarter and the games are going to run better and be more accurate, and you're going to have a better time. Here are some charts showing, wow, here's how it was before and here is how it is now. There's massive uplifts in some of these. Look at this, 500%. This is like a more reasonable, like 30%. That's still like really, really good. And then right under that, ghost busting with the native scaling. They talk about how sometimes upscaling the game can mess with the post-processing and create weird nauseating effects. Like we saw with Jak and Daxter, the way that was handled did not look great. Texture replacements are now just kind of built in. You can dump textures, edit them, load them back. Here's a little before and after. This is something that's been around for a little bit. I do have like a little special build PCSX2 that I use for Mercenaries, like I was saying before. And then let's go ahead and scroll down. I want to go ahead and go over some of the fixes they've done. Look at that. That is crazy. Burnout. Now the sky is not black. I love that. There's a few other games that I just am going to very quickly go ahead and show off that they've done some work changing up the way that the rendering works. That is a huge difference. Not everything needs to be super dark and weird and artifacty. Ace Combat, again, another huge difference. Lines on the screen. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Need for Speed, you kind of actually get some lights and reflections going how they should be. So many different little things and so many different games in the past 4 years that just run a lot better or a lot more accurate, or both in many cases. And so now I think it's time to go to the gauntlet. I'm going to take my special Mercenaries build and see if I can throw it into 2.0 and get it working exactly how it was before, even with all the plugins being removed. This is going to seem like a very small thing to highlight because it is a very small thing to highlight, but this also, I think, proves a point that doing all of these filters and upscaling and cleaning up the processing and stuff like that really actually does a lot for the image. And these texture packs are just another nice little layer on top of it for a lot of these games. Right now, you're looking at the base game, air quote base. I'm using everything minus the texture pack. And now I want to show you the texture pack. And here it is with the texture pack on. Wait, what's different? Well, the textures, for one. But where are they different? Did you immediately notice the difference? Here are a few spots where they're different, and you can see that it's this texture pack in particular is very tastefully done. The original image compared to it, you can tell that there's more fidelity, but it really isn't changing that much with it, which I really, really like. Setting up this image and getting this game into this state, insanely easy. I just loaded in the texture pack, I put in the widescreen patch, excuse me, and that's it. Now we're ready to play. So that is the new update for PCSX2. The big 2.0 is out. It's Among Us. It's not sus. I don't know why I said that. It's here. The blog post went over a ton of other things that I didn't get into. So if you see anything on there that you thought was worth covering, maybe even making its own video, let me know. I would love to jump into it a little bit more. What are your favorite PS2 games? And have you had any issues with this emulator in the past on them? Are there any things that you guys would want a little 2.0 revisit? Let me know. I am kind of tossing around the idea of doing like the best version of a game kind of video, like looking at some of the different, not necessarily, I don't know, it's a very complicated thing because it's like, do I want to compare port versus port? And like show, for example, this game is being remastered on the Xbox 360, or now it has a PS4 release, like the Jak and Daxter Sly Cooper games, I think just fairly recently got a PS4 release. Is that as good as their PS3 release? And how does that compare to the PS2 release? And if I put it, the PS2 version in an emulator, how does that go? And then, you know, doing little texture packs and this or that. There's a lot of different ways that you can spin that. So there's it's kind of hard for me to figure out what the nicest way to package that all is, because I don't want to necessarily be like, this is the best way to play it. Like, the best way to play it is the way that you can play it, but maybe a more interesting way to play it is like that. Or like, dude, Final Fantasy VII on PC, there's so many amazing mods that you can just like completely change the way the game is and kind of get like a more I want to say authentic, but it's not authentic. It's the opposite. It's like Final Fantasy VII Enhanced is what I would call it, versus Final Fantasy VII Remake, which changes a lot of fundamentals about the game. A lot of the PC version for Final Fantasy VII has like, well, I'll take the chibi models, and in these instances, I'll replace them with the actual models so you can run around on there. Or I'll expand the backgrounds and make them look a lot better on PC since you're playing in a higher resolution. Or I have there's a voice pack you can get, so the game is narrated and it immerses you in it a lot more. Things like that, I think, are pretty interesting, and I might want to do something on that. I don't know. If you guys have any suggestions for those kinds of things, or just anything using the PS2 emulator in general, I guess, let me know. I would love to hear them. But that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and until the next one, take care. Goodbye.